Job is going to attack the optimistic conventional piety that is typified in the Book of Proverbs. He's going to challenge the assumption that there is a moral world order. The issues that are raised in this book are twofold. First, why God permits blatant injustice and undeserved suffering and evil to exist in the world. And second of all, whether people will be virtuous when they are afflicted and suffering. In other words, are people righteous only because God will reward them for it, or are they righteous because of the intrinsic and inherent value of righteousness? Those are the two issues. Now, literarily, the book contains two primary elements. First, we have a prose story, and that provides a framework for the book. That's chapters 1 and 2, and then it returns in chapter 42 at the end of the book. And into this prose narrative, this prose framework, a large poetic section of dialogue and speeches has been inserted. Okay, so there are two main literary components. Now, the prose framework concerning a scrupulously righteous man named Job, afflicted by horrendous calamity, was probably a standard ancient Near Eastern folktale of great antiquity. The story isn't set in Israel. It's not about an Israelite. It's set in Edom. Job is an Eastern magnate who dwells in the country of Uz, not an Israelite, but the Israelite author has used this older ancient Near Eastern legend about a man named Job for his own purposes. The name Job, which in Hebrew is pronounced Eov, is sort of bivalent in meaning. It can mean enemy in Hebrew, by changing vowels around, but it's the root for enemy, oyev. Or if we take it in Aramaic, it can mean one who repents, a repentant one. And as we're going to see, the name will be appropriate in both senses as the story progresses. Chapters 1 and 2 have this prose prologue about the pious and prosperous Job and his devastation, which is the result of a challenge which is put to God. At the end of that prologue, so at the end of chapter 2, he has 3 friends who come to sit with him in silence for 7 days. Silence doesn't last very long because we move then into the large poetic section, and that extends from chapter 3 all the way to chapter 42, verse 7. There are many ways to map the structure of the book of Job, looking now specifically at the poetic section. First, you have a dialogue between Job and his 3 friends that goes from chapter 3 to chapter 31, verse 40. And it can be divided into 3 cycles of speeches. Job opens each cycle. So the first speech in each cycle is by Job, and then his friends speak in a regular pattern. First Eliphaz with Job responding, and then Bildad with Job responding, and then Zophar. And you have this pattern of 6 speeches. It occurs 3 times, but in fact, the 3rd time, the reply by Zophar is omitted. And that deviation ensures that Job has the first and the last word. He has a summation speech in chapters 29 to 31. At first, the friends seek to comfort Job and to explain his suffering, but they become increasingly harsh, ultimately bearing a callous contempt for Job's condition. Now this section closes with the long speech by Job, as I said, 29 to 31. He's lamenting the loss of his past pleasant life. He protests his innocence. He calls on God to answer. But then Elihu, this previously unannounced 4th friend, appears. He gives 4 speeches from chapters 32 to 37. He admonishes Job. He defends God's justice. And then this is followed by a poetic discourse between God and Job. God, who poses a series of rhetorical questions, and Job, who appears contrite. And that section also falls into 4 parts, rather like Elihu's speech. You have 2 long speeches by Yahweh, 2 short ones by Job. Finally, there's a concluding prose epilogue that vindicates Job. God criticizes Job's friends, and then in a rather unexpected happy ending, we have Job restored to his fortunes and finally experiencing a peaceful death.